predicted yesterday that this would be one of the most challenging budgets that the Chancellor has presented since 2012. On the evidence of what he presented today, he came out very well. He met the challenge head on. It was a very hard-hitting budget. It had a lot of political nuances. And he announced a raft of measures. It was a jam-packed budget, bursting at its seams with features both for corporate tax as well as individual taxation. At the end of the day, the budget was geared towards showcasing the Chancellor's credential as someone who has a grip on the UK economy. It was a I have done it budget. The Chancellor was extremely self-assured and began on a very optimistic note, announcing that the UK was on course for a budget surplus. Predictably, he had some very positive things to say about why the UK should remain within the EU. In many ways, he went a lot further than what many people expected and firmly entrenched his position as pro-EU, albeit a pro-reformed EU and Britain's place within it. Predictably, the first reference to tax in today's budget statement was to anti-avoidance rules. With the tax lock in place, the Chancellor can't really increase tax rates for any material taxes, which means in order to raise revenue given how the public finances are, the Chancellor had to have done one of two things: introduce more anti-avoidance rules and introduce stealth taxation. He has done both of those in today's budget. But the good news first. The UK now proudly marches on in its desire to be the most attractive corporate tax jurisdiction, at least in headline tax rate terms, across the EU and the world. The Chancellor today announced that the corporation tax rate will go down to 17% come 2020. Now that makes the UK incredibly attractive for companies seeking to set up presence in the UK in headline tax rate term. Now you would think with lower corporate taxes, businesses would pay less taxes. Well, the devil is in the detail. Middle England, i.e. small businesses, shopkeepers, will pay less taxes, no doubt about that. But in keeping with the public mood, the Chancellor has sought to increase the tax taking from big businesses, notwithstanding lower headline corporate taxation. There are three measures which are of particular note to large multinational businesses. One, there will now be a cap on interest deduction for large businesses, which will essentially mean that large businesses will now be faced with a higher tax bill, even if they use leverage in the UK. The Chancellor has announced that there will be a cap of 30% of EBITDA. That will be the reference point up to which you can get interest deductions in the UK. The other change, which will hugely impact how IP structures are put in place by large multinationals, has to do with the widening of the category of the type of payments that can be made under the royalties regime to introduce withholding taxes in the UK in relation to such payment. The third significant announcement, which is a bit of a mixed bag, is the flexibility that has been sought to being introduced vis-a-vis tax losses. Tax losses can now be used, carried forward tax losses can now be used in more flexible terms. However, there is a cap on the amount of tax losses, carried forward tax losses, that large businesses can use to offset profits. That is capped at 50%. Predictably, for banks, the situation is a lot worse. The cap stands at 25% for banks in relation to their pre-2015 losses. The big rabbit-out-of-the-hat announcement that this Chancellor has particularly been adept at from past evidence was the announcement that the UK capital gains tax rate will go down from 28% to 20% and from 18% to 10%. Now, this is a huge announcement and something that has caught the media as well as market observers by surprise. Yours truly yesterday and had predicted that capital gains tax may well go up in the near future, if not today. Now, it has completely gone the other way around. Now, this presents two things to us. One is that the Chancellor is obviously very adept and very, very good at managing the media, because this was completely kept under wraps till the last moment. And the other thing that this points out is that the Chancellor is positioning himself very nicely politically, almost in the realm of pre-election giveaway, which is starting a bit prematurely, I would suggest. What can safely be expected is that in the near future, the income tax rate the 45% high rate of income tax can be expected to come down to 40%, which will, to an extent, reduce the gap between capital gains tax and income tax. One thing to note is that this preferential capital gains tax regime is not going to apply to carried interest or to residential real estate. The Chancellor has recognized that UK residential real estate can only be milked for so long, and now he has very smoothly shifted focus to UK commercial real estate. In a way, he's showing confidence in the resilience and the attractiveness of the UK real estate sector. What he has tried to do is to reform the stamp duty land tax regime as it applies to commercial real estate and align it more with the way the sliced manner in which residential real estate is subject to stamp duty land tax. He has increased the stamp duty land tax rate for commercial real estate over £250,000, which effectively means big businesses will now be paying more stamp duty land tax. This is another example of stealth taxation of sort, whereby you increase the tax take without appearing to increase tax rates. The other thing that he has sought to do is to try and increase the tax rate as it would apply to leasehold transactions involving commercial real estate. That will now be 2% of NPV for properties, commercial properties over 5 million, as opposed to 1%, which was the case previously. The big announcement that he has also made in the arena of commercial real estate is that he has now announced that there will be targeted anti-avoidance rule, which will seek to shut down structures employed by offshore developers to develop property in the UK and to have trading income arising in the UK without taxes being paid in the UK. Now that's a substantial announcement. There is the giveaway to the oil and gas sector, given the prices at which oil is trading at the moment. And there is also the reform of business rates to an extent. Now that reform of business rates is targeted in Middle England, the small shopkeepers and the small businesses that the Chancellor referred to in glowing terms as being the building blocks of Britain. There is also the expected, predicted, targeted anti-avoidance rules focusing on personal service companies, disguised remuneration. So there were no surprises there. In all, what does this mean? Two things. One, the Chancellor has carried on the theme of the UK being incredibly attractive in tax rate terms from a corporation tax perspective. But he's also being a bit of a conjurer here, because what he's seeking to do is to increase tax take while keeping the corporation tax rate low. And the way he's doing that is by introducing anti-avoidance rules, which are targeted at large multinational businesses. The pre-election giveaway season has started a bit early here, and the Chancellor has announced the reduction of the capital gains tax rate. Now that effectively means that the UK is very attractive for long-term investment in assets. Now, this is a bit of a precursor as well, I think, to the eventual reduction of the income tax rate from 45% to 40%. But that's for another year and another day.